Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great week. I just want to get you started on the coding lesson that we're going to be doing in class together. We're going to build a little bit of it before class at home, and then you'll bring it in and we can continue from there in the classroom session. So hopefully you like this format. Let me know how it's working for you. I want to help in any way I can. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to download from our server the folder of images, okay? So you're going to go to our class materials and class notes, go into the coding folder. All right, in lesson 3, that's the one that we're doing. And there's a folder in there called lesson 3 images. All right, so I have some other images in there that are meant to help with this exercise, but I need you to download lesson 3 images. Okay, so take a minute to do that. All right, once you have that done, you're going to see in there that it came with a folder of images, an IMG folder for images. And in that, it's got 4 SVG files or scalable vector graphics, which is what we use for any vector files on the web. If you're using raster files or bitmap files, you're going to use JPEGs or PNGs. Okay? So make sure that's all in there. And then I want you to create on your desktop or in the folder of your choice, you're going to create a folder called lesson 3 or my exercise or class exercise or whatever you want it to be. But make sure you have a folder that's only going to house this project that we're doing together, this follow along project, okay? And then in that folder, I want you to drag over your IMG file of images, okay? You can get rid of that folder that you downloaded now that's empty if you'd like, okay? So in your lesson 3 folder, I'm going to call mine lesson 3, and so whatever you called yours, just reference that. There's an IMG folder, and in that is 4 SVG files for the images, okay? All right, now with that, okay, I want to show you what we're going to be building together. And what we're building together is this web page right here. So pretty simple, all right? It's actually got 3 other pages, so 4 HTML files in all for 4 pages, okay? A header, main content area, right, and then footer, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started on this together. All right, and just for your own reference, I've also included a big screenshot of the page itself. All right, and what I want you to look at here is see if you can start to spot via like the trunk test where you kind of blur your eyes a little bit or hold it far away, the shapes of boxes that make up this page. That's really important to start seeing in HTML so you can start seeing what boxes fit within other boxes. So for example, right here, what we're going to be building today is a header, right? Now the header is kind of like a big white box, right, that goes all the way across our screen. All right, and then within the header, there's some smaller boxes. So we have this box that goes around the logo, which has 2 boxes in it, one for the image and one for the type. All right, and then we have a box for our navigation, and then in that is 3 boxes for each of the links. Okay, and all of that is within the header. Okay, so you want to kind of start to see how these stacks of boxes and shapes fit together, because that's how you know what tags go around other tags. Okay, so I'm going to explain this multiple times over this lesson, but when there's a tag holding other tags, the top tag, the outer tag, so the header in this case, is thought of as the parent, and anything within it is its children. Okay? And then this box right here is a parent to these 2 children. All right? So one parent can have multiple children, and those children can be parents and have their own children. Okay? And so you just kind of want to start to wrap your head around that. So for example, here we have a box containing this whole area, right? Then we have this blue box is the parent of this text here and this text here. All right, I hope that's starting to make sense. This box here that holds the red, green, blue boxes, that's the parent of the red, green, blue children. The red box is the parent to the red text and the text body. Okay, and so you just kind of want to start seeing how those boxes stack and up, because that's how we're going to use it in our layout. It's called the box model. Okay. All right, so with that kind of explanation done, let's go into brackets and let's start our files, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start an HTML file and a CSS file. So HTML is our structure of our document, it's the information of our document, okay? The CSS is our style document, is this cascading style sheet, okay? And that's gonna tell our HTML how it looks and how it's laid out, okay? So in brackets, come up to File, New, all right, and you can see it's just a blank file. So now we need to save it. So I'm going to do Shift-Command S, or you can go to File, Save As. Now look here, it's default saving into my Getting Started folder. So no matter what application you're using, you want to make sure it's saving in your project folder, okay? So in my case, I need to save it in Lesson 3, and it's going to be a top-level folder. I'm going to call it index.html. Index for home page, and you need to have the .html for everything to read it correctly. All right, go ahead and save it. All right, so you can see the path there, looks okay. You can do a Shift Apple S and make sure it's there, looks okay. All right, now we need to open a second one, so File, New. And now I'm going to do my CSS document. So again, I'm going to do a File, Save As. Make sure it's in your Lesson 3 folder. Once again, it's not in my Lesson 3 folder, so get to your Lesson 3 folder. Now in this case, I'm not going to put my CSS in my top level folder. You can, but most of the time CSS is held in its own folder just like our images are. All right, so I'm going to create a new folder within Lesson 3 called CSS. All right, and in that I'm going to put my new file. So in this case, I'm just going to call it style.css. All right, and again, it needs that .css, just like this one needed the .html, and I'm going to save it, okay? So now we've got our documents all together, and you can double check by opening your Lesson 3 folder that you just created, and just make sure everything's there where it's supposed to be. All right, so you want to do that before you really get going on code. All right, assuming that you've done that, you want to make sure that you have your index.html file clicked. We're just going to work with our HTML right now. And let's go ahead and start coding together. All right. So what comes first is our doc type. So we've done this in class a few times, doc type HTML. Okay. And that's just telling our browser window that we're using HTML. And then you do your open and close HTML tag. And that goes around all HTML that you're using in your home page. All right, and then we've done this before in class. I'm going to go ahead and open with my head tag, and this is going to be all the information about my site. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is tell it what character set I'm using. So we're going to do a meta tag. So meta char set equals UTF-8. Okay. Next up, we're going to do our description. So I'm going to do another meta tag. This is names equals description. So you have to tell it what we're about to put in this, and then we give it some content. So content equals, and then you can say whatever you want. I'm going to say a site about red, green, and blue. Okay. And again, this description is what comes up if somebody were to Google this. All right. So I know in class we've done things like we've added in that it's English, and we've done some other types of meta tags. I'm just going to keep it simple on this one. And the last one I'm going to do is a title. Okay. And this is what comes up in like your browser tab or window. All right. So I'm just going to call this red, green, and blue. You can call yours whatever you want. All right. Now you want to make sure you save it. So remember, this dot right here is showing us that it's not a saved file. All right, so you want to make sure you save it. So just a Command S will save it, or you can do a File, Save. And it should all be in the right spot, and everything's looking great. Okay. Now something I want to show you how to do that's a little fun for a change, all right, is I'm going to show you how to link up some Google fonts. So for our project, we're going to use some different types of fonts that aren't built in to the browser, okay? And if you want to do that, there's all sorts of options out there, and what we're going to do is do Google Fonts. Google Fonts need to be linked up in your head of your HTML document so that you can use them in your CSS. Somewhere they need to be told, go find this font and where to find it, okay? So I'm going to show you how to do that. And first off, I'm going to put in a comment. So that's just caret, exclamation point, dash, dash. And I'm just going to type in here Google Fonts. And now I have a place to put them, all right, and a good comment tag so I know where they are. So go ahead and save your file. Come into Google Chrome, or any browser really, and just go ahead and search Google Fonts. All right, there's the web page, so you know how to find it. And it comes up with all sorts of stuff, right? There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fonts, okay? And lots of options in there. So you can get into a real hole, right? But there's all sorts of ways to search for it. You can search for something, you can search fonts, you can look at categories of fonts, has all sorts of different kinds here, serif, sans serif, display, handwriting, monospace. Remember that on web we try to stay away from decorative fonts, okay? Just because they're there doesn't mean you need to use them, okay? You can even change the background color, right, as you're searching and show what font size. So if you know you're going to do something as like a huge header tag or something, you can come in here and look at, well, I want to see what the font looks like massive, okay? But if you're going to do like body copy, you know, where you're doing like 16 or so, then you can bring it down to 16 so you can get a sense of how it's going to read. So let's say I want to use this Roboto, okay? You can also, this is trending now, you can also search by most popular, okay? And you can see here that most popular right now is Roboto and Open Sans. And why is that? Because they're super readable for things, okay? So they're used all the time. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use them because they're used a lot. They're used a lot because they're readable, okay? So don't be afraid to use those. I'm going to go ahead and use Open Sans, and you do that by hitting that plus mark. And then down here it says Family Selected. So I'm going to open that up. And this is the information I need right here, okay? All right, now don't close this window yet, but what I want you to do is copy this HTML right here where it says link. Just select it and copy it. All right, now with that done, go back to brackets and paste in that link. All right, then save your document. Now we've linked up Open Sans so that we can use it. All right, so easy peasy there, no big deal. Now there is one other font that we use on our site, and you can pick any font that you want for this. I'm going to use a font that's probably way overused, and it's called Lobster. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab Lobster. All right, so make sure you're selected on Lobster here, not Open Sans. Okay, all right. This one here, if you do one at a time, right, if you do 2 at a time, they'll put them both into one tag. All right, if you get rid of one, then you only have one at a time. So you can embed them each individually, or you can do it 2 at a time. It's totally fine either way. All right. So I'm going to do them one at a time, right, just so that it's more readable for you guys when you come back to look at it. Okay. All right, so we have our Google Fonts set up. All right, and we have our comment there so that we can use it really well. So with that, I'm going to come over to my CSS document. I'm going to do one more thing with the Google Fonts. I know you haven't coded much in CSS yet. Make sure your CSS window is active, okay? And I'm going to make sure it's in my right view area, okay? And how you code in or make a comment in CSS is just dash star. So CSS is a different syntax. It doesn't work like HTML. It's a different language, all right? So you want to make sure you're typing it differently. But what we're going to do is that there's a special type of link that you need so that you can use CSS. It's right here. So this is the one for Lobster. And so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it into my CSS document so I can find it easily without having to look it up. And I'm going to do the same for Open Sans. Okay. So here I'm just going to grab that link for Open Sans, or that embed text to style it in CSS. I'm going to paste that in a comment in my CSS too. And so /* and * is how we comment, and that way I've got the proper code there and I don't need to go back and find it again. Okay, so that's how you use Google Fonts. Really simple, really easy and fun. I hope you enjoy playing with those throughout the semester. There's a whole bunch of font families in there we're going to talk about another day, but I just wanted to give you a preview. Okay, all right, So now I've got all my head tag done and I'm ready to rock and roll. All right, I'm going to go back to my no split screen because we're going to stay in CSS a little bit more. Okay. All right. And then in here, you could beautify this if you want. Okay. And then in here, I'll beautify it now so you can see it. I'm going to make my body tag under make sure it's under your head tag. It shouldn't be within your head tag. Okay. So now I've got my body tag open and close. I always like my HTML tag very close tag very close to my close of my body tag. All right, so now I've got my body ready so I can start putting in the things that will display on my website. And so the first part of my website, remember you code, when you think about the page, you code top to bottom, left to right. That's how you code. All right, so at the very top of our page, we have our header. Now remember, header is like a semantic tag. You call it what it is, all right? So it's part of the structure of the site. And so if it's in the header, you call it the header. And so that's going to wrap around my entire bar of my logo title, and my navigation is all going to be within header, right? Think of the box. So header is going to be the parent of all those children, okay? So within header, I'm going to do a div, okay? Now in this one, we need to, well, before I get to that, in my div, okay, I'm going to do another div, because this div will have two parts, right? I'm going to do my logo picture and my logo title. So I need a div here that's holding my image, okay? And so this one I'm going to call IMG. I'm going to do my source equals, and then I find it. So in my image folder, I'm going to grab my RGB main file, and that's like my little logo, okay? And then another best practice when you're pulling in images is to give it an alt tag. An alt tag is like my alternate text, and it's really good for accessibility if a screen reader is reading this and you can't just, they can't see the image, it explains what it is. So here I'm just going to go logo for RGB site, okay? And that's it, all right? Make sure you have \caret to close the tag. All right, so that's that part. And then also within this div container that's holding the picture and the title, we have our H1. And my H1 is just really simple. It's just called RGB, and it's the site title. All right, so that goes with the logo in this one. Okay? All right, now the problem with this is, how do we talk to these? They're both called div, which is the exact same thing, isn't it? Okay? So this is going to be the first step of getting ready for CSS, all right? And the first step to get ready for CSS is to make sure we call things that need to be talked to individually something individual, all right? And so there's two methods to do that. We have something called an ID and something else called a class. An ID, just like, think of it as your photo ID, okay? So your ID can only be used by you. One person is only allowed to use your ID, all right? That's the same in HTML. If something is used once on a page, then you can call it an ID. Just like there's many classes at OU, a class can be used many times on a page. And so why would you want to use something once versus many times? Okay, so let's take a look at our website again. Look at this page here, all right? Up here, we only have one logo and one H1 title, all right? So those would be IDs. We're never going to use them again. We're never going to style them that same. We're never going to have them anywhere else in the page exactly the same as this. We might use this font again. We might use this image again. But in terms of this place, in this method, in this size, we're only going to use it this one time. As opposed to this styling of our text and this styling of our text is the exact same. Different shaped boxes because they have parents around them that we can talk to. But in terms of these tags here, they're all the exact same styling, right? That's why we use a class for these. So we can talk to them all, just one class, and we can change it and it works to all of them, okay? But the IDs, we only use one time, okay? So I need to name these two divs. Now, normally you would do this as you go. I just wanted a chance so that you could see the explanation of why we're giving these an ID equals. So this is within the opening ID tag is a logo. Okay, I'm just going to call that logo. All right, now what I like to do is I like to find the close ID tag, and right after this, we talked about this in class, make a comment, close logo div. That way I can always find the close. You'd be surprised when you start having parents and children all over the place, you start to lose what div closes what, so you want to be able to find it. Now this div around the image, all right, now you want a container around the image because it's easier to talk to the container and have things happen to it than it is to talk to the image itself. So it's easy to put the image in a parent or in a box, okay? This div, I'm going to give another ID. I'm going to call logo-image or img, whatever you want to do. And again, I'm going to comment that close tag so I can always find it. So close logo img div. That way I never have to go hunting. If this gets really long, I can always find it. This is a good time to save this, all right? It's also a good time to either do your live preview or drag your HTML file into Google Chrome so that you can see it. I'm going to go ahead and do live preview because I'm in brackets, depends on what you're using. And this will make sure our content is showing up, which it is. Now the logo's huge because we haven't sized it yet, so it's taking up the whole page because it's an SVG, and an SVG doesn't have a size unless you give it a size. And there's our RGB H1 tag, okay? So everything's looking exactly like how I expected it to look right now, okay? So we closed our logo tag, but also, if you remember, we have our navigation in this tag, okay? Or in our header, all right? So you want to come in here, you're going to create an NAV tag for navigation. This is another one of those semantic tags, just like header, so that we can use that to basically, we're calling it what it is, all right? And then within this, we're going to have an unordered list. And unordered lists are really common to use for navigation because they're very easy to spread around the same way and space the same way, as opposed to putting all your links in divs, which means you've got to use classes all the time, and it's a real pain. So the most common way to do your navigation, right, if you have a series of links, is to do an unordered list. If I could type. And then within that, we're going to do our list items, and each list item is going to be a link. So I'm going to have one LI, and it's going to be red. I'm going to do another LI tag within the UL, and it's going to be green. I'm going to do one last one, and it's going to be blue. Okay, and that's all within our navigation, right? And above that is our logo. All right, so the navigation is not within the logo div because it's actually not within that, but they're both within header. Okay, so double check your structure. If you have it right, we'll move on. All right, so assuming that your HTML is the right structure, right, that it looks right on the page when you preview it, okay, that is the wrong preview. All right, so you've got all the stuff there that you're supposed to have, including that nav items that you've put in, okay? Then let's go ahead and move forward. So first thing I'm going to do is save it, then I'm going to do a quick beautify on it, just make sure it's all cleaned up, all right? I'm going to kind of bring that header in a little bit, all right? Now we're going to start on CSS. Now I know we have not done this before, so I'm going to introduce a lot of new concepts quickly, and I kind of just want you to go with me on it, right? And we're going to remember, this is just the first time. You're going to see this stuff over and over and over again. So you'll pick up on it and learn to ask questions as you go, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is in our HTML file, we have to connect our CSS file to it. Right now, there's nothing telling it that it's talking to the CSS file. We have to tell it to go find it, that this is the CSS file it wants, all right? So this information goes in our head, okay? So back up in that information around the site, same place you put the Google fonts and the title and all that, we're going to connect our CSS file. So first thing I'm going to do is make a comment saying CSS linked, okay? And let's go ahead and link our CSS. So how we do that is just a link rel equals style sheet, and this is the type that it is. We're connecting a style sheet. That's the relationship. href, that's the href is the reference, right? So what file are we trying to go find? And just like source, we have a folder structure, and so we have to go CSS folder, and then within that is style.css. Okay, and there's one last thing in this we have to do, and that's type, and that's the language that it's in. So for this one is a text file and -css. All right, now all of this stuff, and then there's no closing tag, it's just a one-line thing, just like our other link and just like our meta tags. Okay, now you may go, oh my god, how am I supposed to remember that, because I have to do this all the time, right? Well, if you get stuck on that, there's all sorts of resources out there. And one of my favorite resources is w3schools.com. I've mentioned this in class, but this is where you can search all sorts of tags and you can search within it. And it's got a really good search function to it that's supposed to help you out, okay? So it's hard to remember all these tags at first, especially when you don't know them, right? How would you remember something you've never learned? So go and use W3 Schools to help you figure it out, okay? All right, so now we've got our CSS linked. We want to go in to our CSS document and start to do some things. All right, so I'm going to show you a few things first, and then I'm going to come back out and explain something. All right, so I like doing CSS on a split screen because we literally talk back and forth to the elements. Okay, all right, so I'm going to open up my CSS in the right screen, and my HTML is in the left screen. You can set yours up whatever way makes you comfortable. Okay. So in my CSS, what you have to remember is CSS is a completely different language than HTML. All right, so we use some of the same words so that we can talk to it, but the structure of the language is completely different. Okay, and so what we want to make up each tag is the name of the tag that we're talking to, curly brackets, and then properties within those. Okay, that's how we're going to talk to it. And each of those parts has a name to it. So first we start with our selector, and our selector is just the tag that it is. So for just to start, I'm going to talk to body, right? So it's body space, curly brackets, and then within the curly brackets is what we want to say to our body tag. And so this is what we're styling. So we're adding a style to our entire body tag. So let's say, for example, I wanted to change the background color of my entire page. Okay, I'm just going to make it red to show you, right? This is not how this right here, typing in red, it works for certain colors, right? It's not normally how you want to pull in colors, but it's fast. And so I want to show you that because it's an easy way to turn something in color and make sure it's all working. And this is another way to make sure you linked your CSS correctly, is to do something like this first so that you see it right away and then you know your CSS is working. So when I come to my page, yep, my entire body tag turned red. Okay. And so that's how we know everything's working correctly and linked up. All right. Now, so that's my selector. Background color is the property. Red is the property value. All right. So selector, property, property value. Okay. And that's how we want to, that's how all your CSS calls are made. Okay. So here, one of the things that I want you to notice on the preview is, do you see how everything's kind of pushed in, right? That is because browsers have default styling to them, right? That automatically goes onto the page unless you tell it not to go on the page. So we want to tell it to forget those default stylings. And there's two that most browsers come with. Sometimes there's more than that. But for one, it's margin. We want to set that to 0. And padding, we want to set that to 0. Okay, and that's going to take off that default styling. We took off the red background color, that's why that's gone. But can you see how this pushed all the way over the edge now? That's because we took off the default styling of the browser and told it what we wanted it to be. Okay, so let's talk real quick about margin and padding. So I want you to take a break from code for just a minute. We're going to talk about margin and padding. This is a big deal in CSS. Okay. How we code in CSS is with something called the box model. Okay, so here's a picture to help explain the box model. All right, we talked about divs and tags and elements that go around content, right? So you've seen a p tag, you've seen a div, you've seen a header, you've seen nav, you've seen ul, you've seen li, right? All those tags are holding a piece of content like a box. All right. Now, sometimes one parent can have multiple children. In this case, when you're looking at this, think of the content as the one child, single child. Okay. Right here, this dotted line is the box. Okay. So that's literally the tag. Padding goes inside the box and makes the box bigger. Border is the thickness of the actual line that is the box, just like you'd think of a normal border. Margin goes outside of the box. All right, so the analogy that I like to think about is like a pillow, right? So think of this content as our pillow. It's the actual pillow. And then around the pillow is a pillowcase, and that's like a div or a nav or header, or one of the tags, right? But inside there's an image, or inside there's the RGB within the H1, something like that, okay? If you add padding inside the pillowcase, it makes the pillowcase bigger. And you can add padding just on top, you can add padding just on bottom, you can add padding just on the right side or just the left side, or you can add it on 2 sides, or you can add it on all 4 sides, okay? Your pillowcase itself is the border, right? And that can be thick, it can be barely there, non-existent, not show up, could be invisible, okay? Margin is like setting your pillow on the bed and moving it around and sliding it around. We're not making the pillow bigger, we're just moving it down or moving it up from the bottom or moving it from the left or from the right, okay? That's how the box model works. Here's another picture to look at. All right, so our content has a height and a width. Padding adds on to the box, makes it bigger. All right, border, a lot of times you won't have a border and it'll just be nothing, and so this would be like invisible. And then the margin slides around, so you can have more margin on the left and slide it way over. You can have more margin on the bottom and slide it way up, okay? But margin slides this black box, your pillow, around the bed, okay? Padding stuffs the pillow and makes it bigger. The pillow is what it is, okay? That's the box model, all right? So let's go ahead and back into brackets. Let's start working with this a little bit, all right? So we've already removed the pre-default styling on our body tag. Now let's work with our header a little bit. So it's header, right? And when you're talking into a tag that has a name, right, like a tag like header or body or nav, you can just say the name of the tag. You don't need any special characters with it. And so the first thing I want you to do here is I just want you to turn the background color to red. Chances are you're not using that in your site, so you'll see it really clearly, right? And that lets you see where the container thinks it is. So what is this parent actually holding? And that gives you something to look at and talk to. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a width. And the width, I want it to be 100%. Right? So there's 3 ways to size, but we're only going to talk about 2 today in CSS. And one is the percent. The other is with pixels. All right. And there's another one called EMs, but we're not going to talk about that today. So you can either do percent, which is based on your browser. So this is 100% of the browser, or you could do 50% of the browser, or you could do 80% of the browser, right? Or you could make it pixels, and if it's pixels, it'll never get bigger than that. So let's say we said we wanted it to be 1,000 pixels. That means if our screen is larger than 1,000, the header will stop at 1,000. All right, so if we want our header to extend across the page the same no matter what size the browser window is, you use percentages. So we're going to do 100%, okay? Now the height, doing height as percentages is tricky because people make their windows bigger and smaller, and sometimes the aspect ratios are different and things like that. So on height, it's very common to go pixels instead of percent because of that. And so here I'm going to do 80 pixels. Not always. There's sometimes that you'll see things called a percent or like lock to the view height, but for now we're just going to go pixels. Okay. Let's save that and see how it looks. All right. So I don't know if you can see it up here, but you see my red box shifted. Okay. And so it stops there now. So it's going all the way across, all right, but now it's only 80 pixels high, all right, so it worked. We're talking to it no problem, okay. Now, one of the things on our final site that you'll see, our final example, right, which I closed, great. I won't go back in and open it for now, is that the background scrolls underneath it, okay? So to do that, we're going to do a position fixed, okay? Now you can see when we do position, there's a few different options here, absolute, fixed, right? I'll explain what those are down the road, but what fixed does is it means hold it where it is. Don't move it at all, okay? Don't move the box at all. So we're going to do a position fixed, okay? The other one that you might see is position relative or position absolute, okay? I'll explain what those are the next time that we use them. We're not going to be using them in this lesson, all right? I just want you to know what those are. I've heard the words before, okay? Now here too, what I want to make sure that we have is we don't want the margin tucked down at all. So we want to make sure it's margin top is 0. All right, now if we say margin top 0, it does make sure that the top is 0, okay? Only on the top side. If we do margin here 0, it means all 4 sides. All right, if you type it out, like let's say you did margin, it'd be 10, 0, 0, 0, right? That goes top, right, bottom, left. All right, so you can also do it that way. And you'll see all those ways when you're out there coding, okay? So for now, we're going to leave the header for a second. We're going to fix that background color in a minute, but for now I just want it red so you can see it. But we don't want to talk to next. All right, we've talked to the header, and we've given that a width and a height. So now we want to come in and talk to our logo because that image is just way too big. So we want to start working that out, okay? So remember, logo is around both our H1 tag and our image, all right? It's around both, so it's the parent of both, all right? To talk to an ID, you have to go # logo, all right? That's how you tell it it's an ID. If you just type logo, it's looking for a tag, right? And there is no such thing as a logo tag. It's a name that you gave it. So an ID gets logo, hashtag logo. A class would get period, then the name of the class you gave it, okay? So we're going to go logo, width, and we're going to give this a width of 200 pixels, right? So this one, I don't want it to be a percentage, right? You could give it a percentage of like 20% and see how you like it. On this one, we're just going to try pixels and see how it goes, all right? And let's see what happens there. All right, so this is sized it to 200 pixels, and the image automatically fills the parent that has a size. So this image actually has another parent called logo image, right? But we haven't given that a size yet. So the image is finding the parent closest to it that has a size. Like, somebody give me a rule. Where's my rule on how big I'm supposed to be? And it finds that parent. So that's why it's gone to 200 pixels, because even though it's inside logo IMG, it's also inside logo, which has a width of 200%. So it locks to that, okay? So we need to talk to just that image and tell it, don't fill the entire container. So we're talking to an ID again, so let's go logo IMG, curly brackets, and let's give that a width of 30%, and this is going to be 30% of 200 pixels, okay? Because it's going to be 30% of its parent. So logo IMG has a parent of logo, so it'll be 30% of its parent that has a size, so 30% of 200 pixels, okay? I know that's a lot to think about, okay? So there it is. It sized it down to be 30%. If you want to see this, remember I just showed you, you can always add a background color of something simple, like green or something, so that you can see the boxes, and I think that's really helpful so you can kind of see where things are. So this green box is 200 pixels, and this logo image is now 30 pixels of the 200, okay? Now let's go back up to our logo tag here, and we definitely don't want it pushed all the way over the left, right? We want it moved in just a little bit. So let's add a margin left, and let's just slide it in like 40 pixels or so. Okay. Right. And on the logo image, there will be a point that we actually don't want it to be 30%. Because imagine if we brought it into mobile and it would be 30% of the screen there, right? It could keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So we want to give it or be larger than we want it to be. So we want to give it a min width. In this case, I'm going to give it a min width of 100 pixels, saying I don't care what screen you're on, stay 100 pixels. Now you could size that wherever you want. I just wanted to show you what min width does. Min width means it will never get smaller. Max width means it will never get bigger. And that's going to make a lot more sense when we get to responsive, but I wanted you to hear it at least once now. Okay? Save it and let's take a look. All right, so looking good so far. Okay, now it's 100 pixels. Do you see how that came in? Right, so now 30% was going to be less than 100 pixels. So let's change that down to 50 pixels and see how that looks. See if it's locking back to 30%. Yep. So that's more like 30% now instead of getting stuck at a pixel size. And so that's a little more like what we want it to be. Okay, now the last thing that we want to do is we want to make sure our image tag always fills its parent. All right, no matter what size it is. So we want to make sure that our IMG itself is always filling logo image. All right, so to do that, I'm going to go pound logo IMG to talk to that tag, space IMG is the tag within the parent, and that's how I talk to one tag within another tag. Okay, because we all have lots of IMGs all over this, so you have to tell it somehow it's specific. All right. So for this, we just want to give that a width of 100% so that the image always is filling its parent container, which is 30% of 200 pixels. All right, just trust me on this. It's a good thing to do to always do the IMG tag, size it somehow based on its parent, so it helps as you're coding down the road and moving things around. All right, so good job. We've got that all set. Okay. Now we're going to do a little bit of styling on this RGB before we tell it to move upwards. All right, that'll be the last thing that we do. All right, so let's go ahead and talk to our H1 tag. And again, that's a semantic tag, so you just talk H1. All right, the first heading. Now the first thing that we want to give it is a font. All right, now for this, it's a font family. All right, and you get all these default fonts. Okay. There's also some names that you can type in that are default, but for this, we already chose one that we wanted, right? And we even pulled the code in up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, not the comment, but inside the comment, I'm going to copy that and put it into my H1 curly brackets, okay? And that has changed the font. And so if yours did not just do that, check your link in your HTML, check your style, and your property call in your CSS, and make sure it's all in the right spot and worded correctly. Okay? All right, so good job there. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to give it a color. And so color when you're talking to font is just color. I know it seems like it would be font color because it's background color, but it's not. It's just color when you're talking to the font. All right, now this we want to go find the color that we want, and what ours is going to be is a dark gray. Not that you have to use this site, but one of my favorite sites to use is Color Hex. All right. Colors on the web are typically done as these hex codes right here. Okay. So regardless of which one you're using, I'm going to use a dark gray like that. All right. You have a few ways you can pull in the hex. This is the RGB, the 50-50-50 right here is the RGB, or you get the hex code here. All right, so what I'm going to do is just copy that hex code, paste it in, semicolon to close out that property value, okay, and that should change the font color. All right, it's very subtle, but it changed the font color. So yay, you've done a great job with your CSS so far, right? And you can also get hex codes from within InDesign and Photoshop. You can get the RGB values, right? If you're going to do an RGB, it's just color RGB A, and the A is the alpha, okay? All right. But for now, we'll just leave it at that, okay? So the last thing that we need to do here, right? Well, we need to do a couple things right now, but the last thing that we need to do here is we need to slide everything up into the right spot because they're still stacked on top of each other, because that's what HTML wants to do, is it wants to stack things top to bottom. We have to tell it to push it left to right. The method that I'm going to show you in this class, and we're just going to very briefly start today, is going to be something called Flexbox. Okay, now Flexbox is used all over CSS. It's fairly new. All right, you'll also see something called Grid, right? We're going to use a method called Flexbox. And if you've ever heard of Bootstrap, Bootstrap is built on Flexbox. So if you understand Flexbox, you someday will be able to do Bootstrap. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's okay. I put a cheat sheet on here for Flexbox, right? We're going to talk about it much more in depth in class, but I just want to give you a preview while we're doing this little exercise. All right. So to do Flexbox, what it is that we have to tell the parent container that it's a flexible container. Chill out, parent, just be flexible. Let us line up how we want to line up, right? That's what we're trying to tell it to do. So to do that, we find the parent. So our overall parent here is header, right? Header is around everything, okay? In our header, right, property here, we're going to do something called display flex. All right, so we're saying be a flexible container header, right? Chill out, okay? Once we do that, okay, do you see how everything pulled up to the side? All right, so the nav went from being below to up next to it, right? It lined up in a row. That's what flexible containers want to do. We can tell it to stay a column, but they want to be a row, okay? But why didn't the RGB come up? I want you to think about that for a second. Why did the navigation come up to the side? They're all within header, but not the RGB. The reason why is because RGB, right, this H1 tag that holds it, has its own parents. All right, so it's trying to listen to its parents and not the next parent up, right? Not the grandparents. It's trying to listen to its own parents. So we need to tell all the parents to be flex boxes. All right, so we're going to come in here to logo now and do display flex. Okay, and let's see what that changed. Yep, and there it is. It dropped RGB right up to the side, no problem. Okay, so now we can start playing with our spacing a little bit more, right? We also want to make sure our nav is a flex container, right? So if you'd like, go in here, we'll do one more tag called nav, and let's make that display flex, okay? And there's a whole bunch of things that we can do with display flex, all right, with flexible containers, but that'll be, you know, as we go, we'll add in some things here and there. I'm sorry, it's got to be nav UL, has to be display flex for that to pop into a row correctly, okay? All right, so you guys are doing great. I know it's a lot to take in. You're doing great. All right, let's go ahead and just finish up really quick this styling right here on the logo. I want to show you two more things. Okay, so on that logo container here, you can see that it's pushed all the way to the left and it's not quite centered up. Like it's kind of wonky where it is, and so it's going to look sloppy, right? So in our logo ID call, in our property in CSS, we can do a couple things with display flex to help it line up better, all right? And the first thing we're going to do is justify content, talks to the main axis. In this case, it's going to be the horizontal axis. And I want it to be center. Okay, so you see how it pushed it to the center of the box? So it slid it along the horizontal axis to be center. And then we're going to do an align items center. Okay, and that moved it down to center. Do you see that? Okay, and those are two things you can do with Flexbox to tell it where you want to go. Justify content can also be flex start with the start beginning of the Flexbox, the left side, flex end, right? There's other calls in there that we'll get into down the road, but that kind of lines them up so much more nicely, which is great, okay? And then you can also do this same thing to any other elements that you want to, all right? But that's about where we're going to stop for now. What I'd like you to do is go through and you can just take off the background colors. You know, you don't need them anymore. If you need to find them, you can just type in Command F and look for where your background colors are, right? And you can take them off. Now, what our background color, if it's helpful, is going to be in our header, and you can do this now, is just an RGBA parenthesis, right? And it's actually going to be a 0 or 255, 255, 255.5. All right, and what this is this is the RGB for white. Is all the colors at full, right? That's white. 0.5 is 50% alpha. All right. And then you can take off the green background color of the other box of the logo container. All right. And there you go. You have a mostly done header. We're going to come in and spread these out better and line them up the same way, but you can always play with it. And it looks like here in our RGB, see how tight it is? Let's go ahead and add a margin left on our H1 just to slide it in a little bit. I'm just going to do 10 pixels. You know, we're just going to slide that pillow over, right? There it is, all right? So good job getting through our first lesson CSS. I know it looks like we haven't done a whole lot, but you guys did a ton today, and I think you're doing great, all right? Let me know if you have any questions. It was simple things today. We're going to go into this a lot more detail, especially Flexbox. So it's okay on that if you're still a little like, what? But if you're having trouble with CSS linking up, and basic styling, like changing your fonts and stuff and changing background colors, I want you to come talk to me right away, okay? So I can get you through that part and help clarify anything that you need on that. But hopefully at this point you're feeling the HTML structure pretty solidly, you're seeing how the CSS connects to it, and you hopefully learned a few tricks in there along the way. Now the big things like Flexbox and hex codes and Google Fonts and stuff like that we're going to be doing over and over and over again. Box model and Flexbox we're going to be talking about over and over again in a lot more detail, but hopefully they gave you a little preview.